Eleanor Hartwell dropped to her knees in the snow, clutching a dead man's letter to her chest. The words blurred through her tears. A home, a husband, a new beginning, all lies now. The man who wrote them lay 3 days buried. But the barefoot boy standing before her, his lips blue and cracked, wasn't a lie. "You the bride?" he asked. "Pa's dead. There's 10 of us now. 9 since the baby stopped breathing last night." If you want to see how one woman's impossible choice became the greatest love story never told, subscribe now and follow this journey to the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The boy didn't wait for her answer. He turned and walked toward the wagon, his bare feet leaving red prints in the snow. Eleanor pushed herself up, her legs, shaking her mind, screaming at her to run back to the train, back to Boston. Back to the gray safety of a life that had already beaten her down. But she didn't run. "Wait!" Her voice cracked. "Wait, please!" He stopped but didn't turn around. "What's your name?" "Benjamin McAllister." No warmth, no hope. Just the flat voice of a child who had stopped expecting anything good. "You coming or not? The little ones ain't eaten since yesterday." Eleanor looked at the train. The conductor was already calling for eastbound passengers. She could climb back on. She could return to the boarding house in Boston, where she'd spent 3 years stitching other women's wedding dresses while her own life fell apart. She could pretend Jacob McAllister's letter had never arrived. But the boy was watching her now, his eyes brown like winter mud, old like a man's held something that stopped her cold. He expected her to leave. Everyone always left. "I'm coming," she said. She grabbed her 2 trunks and followed him through the snow. The wagon creaked as she climbed onto the bench. Benjamin didn't offer help. He simply clicked his tongue, and the mule lurched forward, pulling them away from the station and into the endless white. "How far?" Eleanor asked. 6 miles. "And the others, your brothers and sisters? Home? Who's watching them?" "Hannah. She's 10. Eleanor's stomach turned. A 10-year-old watching 9 children in this cold with their father freshly buried. "Your mother, dead." Benjamin cut her off. "Birthing the baby, 10 months ago." The wind howled across the open prairie. Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter, but nothing could stop the chill that had settled into her bones. She had so many questions, but the boy's jaw was set like stone, his small hands gripping the reins with strength that didn't belong to a 12-year-old. "How did he die?" she finally asked. "Your father?" Benjamin didn't answer for a long moment. The mule's hooves crunched through ice. Somewhere distant, a crow called out. "Cave in," he said at last. He was digging a new well. Ground gave way. Took him 3 days to die. Eleanor reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter she'd read 100 times on the train. "Miss Hartwell, I ain't got long. The infection's spreading and I can feel it taking me. I know this ain't what you signed up for. You came expecting a husband and all you'll find is a grave. But my children got no one else. Their mama's people disowned her when she married me, and my brother Samuel ain't been seen in 6 years. If you turn back, I won't blame you. But if you stay, if you could find it in your heart to stay, I'm leaving you everything. The land, the house, the children. If you'll have them. I know it's too much to ask, but I'm asking anyway. May God forgive me for putting this burden on a stranger." Jacob Nathaniel McAllister. Eleanor folded the letter and pressed it against her chest. She had come expecting a husband, a quiet life, maybe children of her own, someday. Something she'd given up hoping for after Theodore died, after the fever took him while he was trying to save others. Instead, she had inherited a dead man's desperate hope. "You read it." Benjamin's voice cut through her thoughts. "Yes." "Then you know what you're walking into." "I know what your father wrote." "That ain't the same thing." The boy's hands tightened on the reins. "Pa always believed in miracles. Look where that got him." Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't have one. The house appeared over the ridge, and her heart sank. The roof sagged in the middle. One shutter hung by a single nail. Smoke rose weakly from the chimney, barely visible against the gray sky. A fence lay half-collapsed, and the barn behind it looked like it might fall over in the next strong wind. Benjamin pulled the wagon to a stop. Before Eleanor could move, the front door flew open and a small figure burst out. Ben! A girl no more than 10, her dark hair wild around her face, her eyes red from crying. She wore a dress 2 sizes too small and no shoes. "The baby won't eat. I tried and tried, but she just turns her head away." "Hannah." Benjamin's voice went sharp. "Get back inside. You'll freeze." But Hannah had already spotted Eleanor. She froze, her mouth falling open. "Who's that?" "The bride. She came anyway." Hannah's eyes narrowed. She looked Eleanor up and down like a buyer inspecting damaged goods. "Pa's dead," Hannah said flatly. "You know that, right?" "I know." "So why'd you come?" Eleanor's throat tightened. She had asked herself the same question 100 times on the train. Every answer felt like a lie. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I'm here now." Hannah stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Not trust, not hope, just a desperate calculation. Then she turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open behind her. It wasn't an invitation. But it wasn't a refusal either. Eleanor took a breath and stepped through. The smell hit her first. Smoke, sour milk, unwashed bodies, and something else, the sharp, sour scent of sickness. The cabin was dark, lit only by the weak fire in the hearth. As her eyes adjusted, Eleanor saw them. 10 children huddled together like a litter of abandoned pups. The twins sat closest to the fire, identical boys of about 8, their faces pale and pinched. One of them coughed a deep rattling sound that made Eleanor's chest ache. Behind them, a boy of about 6 clutched a wooden horse, his thumb in his mouth, his eyes enormous. Next to him, a girl of maybe 4 pressed against a boy of 7, both of them shivering despite the fire. 3 more children, a girl of about 5, a boy around 3, and a toddler barely walking, sat in a corner watching Eleanor with hollow eyes. And on a straw mattress near the hearth, a bundle lay still. Eleanor moved toward it before she could stop herself. Inside the worn blankets lay a baby. Tiny. Still. Her skin had a grayish tint, her lips blue. "She won't take milk." Hannah appeared at her elbow, her voice cracking. I tried everything, but she just turns away." Eleanor reached down and lifted the baby. She weighed almost nothing, a bundle of bones wrapped in thin skin. Her breathing was shallow, barely there. "How long since she ate?" 3 days, maybe 4. Hannah's face crumpled. "Pa was sick, and I had to take care of everyone, and I didn't know." "Shh." Eleanor pressed the baby against her chest, feeling the flutter of a heartbeat beneath her palm. "You did everything right. You hear me? You kept them alive. But the baby is still breathing." Eleanor looked around the cabin, at the empty pot on the hearth, at the children's hollow cheeks. "Is there milk, cow, goat?" "Cow dried up last week," Benjamin said from the doorway. "We've been giving her sugar water." Eleanor closed her eyes. Sugar water for a baby who needed milk to survive. "What about neighbors?" "Brennan Place is 4 miles east, but we ain't got nothing to trade." Eleanor thought of her trunks still sitting in the wagon. She had brought clothes, a few books, her medical kit from her days helping Theodore, and hidden in the lining of her smallest bag, the last of her savings. $18. Everything she had left in the world. "Help me with my trunks," she said to Benjamin. He didn't move. "Why?" "Because I have money, and I'm going to buy your sister some milk." For the first time, something flickered in the boy's eyes. Not trust, but something close to hope. "I'll go," he said. "You don't know the way." "No." Eleanor handed the baby to Hannah. "You stay with them, all of you. Keep her warm. Keep trying with the sugar water. I'll be back before dark." "It's 4 miles, Benjamin said. "In this cold—" "I've survived worse." Eleanor met his eyes. I buried my husband. I buried my mother. I walked away from everything I knew to come here. She grabbed her coat. 4 miles won't kill me. She was almost out the door when a small voice stopped her. You're coming back, right? Eleanor turned. The 6-year-old with the wooden horse was staring at her, his thumb still in his mouth, his eyes wet. What's your name? Eleanor asked softly. Samuel. Like Uncle Sam. Pa named me after his brother. Well, Samuel. Eleanor crouched down until she was eye level with him. I promise you, I'm coming back. Pa promised too. The boy's voice trembled. He said he'd be right back. Then he didn't come home for 3 days, and when they brought him, his face crumpled. He couldn't talk anymore. He just kept looking at us, and then he stopped. Eleanor's heart shattered. She pulled the boy close, feeling his small body shake with sobs he'd been holding back for days. Listen to me, she whispered. I am not your pa. I'm not going down any well. I'm not going anywhere except to get milk for your baby sister, and then I'm coming straight back. She pulled back and held his face in her hands. Do you believe me? Samuel sniffled. I don't know. That's honest. Eleanor wiped his tears with her thumb. How about this, you watch that door? And when I come through it tonight, you'll know. You'll know I keep my promises. She stood up and walked out before she could lose her nerve. The cold hit her like a fist. Eleanor pulled her coat tighter and started walking, following the faint trail Benjamin had described. East. 4 miles. The Brennan farm. The snow was deep sometimes up to her knees. Her boots, city boots, never meant for this, soaked through within the first mile. Her fingers went numb. Her face burned from the wind. But she kept walking. She thought about Theodore. About the night he'd gone out into the fever wards, even though she'd begged him not to. They need me, he'd said. They have no one else. He'd died 3 days later, and Eleanor had spent 2 years blaming him for leaving her before she finally understood. Some people couldn't walk away from suffering. It wasn't in them. Maybe she was the same. The Brennan farm appeared through the blowing snow like a mirage. A sturdy house, a barn that actually stood straight, smoke pouring thick from the chimney. Eleanor stumbled to the door and knocked. A woman opened it, weathered face, hard eyes, gray hair pulled back severe. She held a rifle. Who are you? Eleanor Hartwell. Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. I was supposed to marry Jacob McAllister. The woman's expression shifted. The rifle lowered. Jacob's dead. I know. I came anyway. Why? Because 10 children are starving in that house, and the baby. Eleanor's voice broke. She hasn't eaten in days. She's dying. I need milk. Please. I have money. The woman misses. Brennan, Eleanor assumed, stared at her for a long moment. You walked 4 miles in this weather for milk. Yes, ma'am. For children that ain't even yours. They're somebody's. Eleanor lifted her chin despite the cold. They're Jacob's, and he asked me to take care of them. Something shifted in the woman's face. Not warmth exactly, but respect. Put your money away. Mrs. Brennan stepped aside. Come in before you freeze to death. The warmth of the house nearly knocked Eleanor over. She stood by the fire shaking uncontrollably while Mrs. Brennan disappeared into the back. She returned with a large jar of milk still warm from the cow. This'll last a day or two. I'll send my boy over tomorrow with more. Mrs. Brennan pressed the jar into Eleanor's hands. You know what you're walking into. 10 children, a house falling apart, debts Jacob couldn't pay even when he was alive. I'm starting to understand. No, you ain't. Mrs. Brennan's voice was hard, but not unkind. This land breaks people. Broke Jacob's wife. Nearly broke Jacob, and it'll try to break you too. Then it'll have to try harder than everything else that's tried. Mrs. Brennan studied her. Then slowly she nodded. You might just make it. You're either the bravest woman I ever met or the dumbest. Maybe both. Maybe. Mrs. Brennan almost smiled. Take the back trail home. It's shorter. And Mrs. Hartwell? Eleanor stopped at the door. Those children have been through hell. They won't trust you. They won't make it easy. But if you stay, if you prove to them you ain't leaving, they'll love you more than you can imagine. Her voice softened. That's what children do. They love the ones who stay. The walk back was brutal. The shorter trail was still 3 miles, and the temperature had dropped. By the time Eleanor saw the cabin lights, she could barely feel her legs. But she kept going. She pushed through the door and nearly collapsed. 10 faces turned toward her. Samuel was the first to move. The 6-year-old threw himself at her legs, wrapping his arms around her, sobbing. "You came back! You came back! I promised!" Eleanor stroked his hair with frozen fingers. "I promised, didn't I? She's got milk." Hannah's voice rose with something Eleanor hadn't heard before, hope. "Ben, she's got milk." What followed was the longest night of Eleanor's life. She sat by the fire, the baby in her arms, dipping her finger in warm milk and letting tiny drops fall onto the infant's lips. Again, and again, and again. The baby wouldn't latch, wouldn't suck, just lay there barely breathing while Eleanor refused to give up. The other children watched in silence. Even the twins stopped fidgeting. Even the toddler stopped fussing. They all just watched, barely breathing, as if a single sound might break whatever spell was keeping their baby sister alive. "Please," Eleanor whispered. "Please, sweetheart. Just a little more." Another drop. Then another. And then finally the baby's tiny mouth moved. Pursed. Began to suck. Hannah burst into tears. "She's eating! She's eating!" Eleanor felt tears streaming down her own face, but she didn't stop. Drop by drop, minute by minute, she fed that baby until the small belly was round, and the breathing steadied, and the grayish skin began to turn pink. "What's her name?" Eleanor whispered. "Hope." Hannah's voice was thick. "Mama named her Hope, said she needed something to believe in." Eleanor looked down at the sleeping infant, at the tiny fingers curled against her chest. "Then we'll make sure she lives up to it." She looked up at the children, all 10 of them hollow-cheeked and exhausted, watching her with eyes that had seen too much loss. "All of you, I need you to listen to me." They straightened, waiting. "I know you don't trust me. I know you don't know me. And I know you've been hurt worse than any child should ever be hurt." Eleanor's voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "But I'm not leaving. Do you understand? I'm not leaving this house. I'm not leaving this land. And I am not leaving you." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "People say that. They always say that." "Then I'll prove it." Eleanor met his eyes. "Every day, for as long as it takes, I will prove it." "How?" "By being here, tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that." She shifted Hope in her arms. "Your father asked me to come. He trusted me with the most precious things he had, you, all of you, and I will not let him down." Silence. Then Hannah stepped forward. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling, but her voice was steady. "I'm tired," she said. "I've been taking care of everyone since Mama died. And I'm so tired." Eleanor held out her free arm. Hannah fell into it sobbing. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Eleanor held her close. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Do you hear me? You're 10 years old. You should be playing, learning, being a child, not carrying the weight of the world." "I don't know how to be a child anymore." "Then I'll teach you." One by one, the other children moved closer. The twins pressed against Eleanor's side. Samuel climbed into what little space remained on her lap. The 4-year-old Grace Hannah whispered, tucked herself under Eleanor's arm. Even Benjamin, who stayed by the door, didn't leave. He watched. He waited. But he didn't leave. And that Eleanor knew was the first small victory. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the fire surrounded by children who had finally stopped shaking, and she made a promise to the darkness. "I don't know if you can hear me, Jacob McAllister, but I swear to you I will take care of them, every last one." The wind howled outside. But inside that broken-down cabin, something had shifted. Something that felt like the beginning of a family. Morning came too fast. Eleanor woke to the sound of coughing, deep wet, rattling. One of the twins sat hunched by the dying fire, his small body shaking with each breath. She was on her feet before her eyes fully opened. How long has he been coughing like this? Hannah appeared beside her, dark circles under her eyes. Started 3 days ago. Pa said it was just a cold. Eleanor pressed her hand to the boy's forehead, burning hot. What's your name, sweetheart? Thomas. His voice was barely a whisper. Tommy. And your brother? James. Jamie. Tommy's twin moved closer, his face tight with fear. Is he gonna die like Pa? No. Eleanor kept her voice steady, even as her heart raced. He's not going to die, but I need hot water. And cloth, clean cloth if you have any. We ain't got much clean, Hannah said. The washing pile's been growing since. Then we'll make do. Eleanor lifted Tommy and carried him to the mattress where Hope still slept. Benjamin, I need you to get the fire going, hot as you can make it. The older boy hadn't moved from his spot by the door. His arms were crossed, his face hard. Benjamin. Eleanor's voice sharpened. Now. Something flickered in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he moved to the hearth, grabbing kindling. Hannah, do you know what's in my trunks? The smaller one. I didn't look through your things. There's a leather bag inside, brown with brass clasps. Bring it to me. The next hour was a blur of boiling water and torn cloth and remedies Eleanor had learned watching Theodore treat patients in Boston. She made a poultice for Tommy's chest. She propped him up so he could breathe easier. She spooned warm water with honey into his mouth, the last of the honey, Hannah whispered, but Eleanor used it anyway. Where'd you learn all this? Benjamin watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. My husband was a doctor. He died 3 years ago. Eleanor didn't look up from Tommy's face. Fever epidemic in Boston. He went into the sick wards to help and didn't come out. Silence. Then Benjamin's voice, softer than she'd ever heard it. That why you came here running from ghosts? Eleanor finally met his eyes. Maybe. Or maybe I was running toward something. Toward what? A dead man in a falling down house. Toward a chance. She smoothed Tommy's hair back from his forehead. Your father gave me that. A chance to matter again. Benjamin looked away, but not before Eleanor saw something crack in his careful armor. By noon, Tommy's fever had broken. He was still weak, still coughing, but the rattle in his chest had eased and color was returning to his cheeks. Jamie hadn't left his brother's side, holding Tommy's hand like he was afraid to let go. You saved him, Hannah whispered. He's not saved yet. He needs rest, good food, warmth. Eleanor looked at the empty pot on the hearth. When's the last time any of you had a real meal? The children exchanged glances. 2 days ago, Benjamin said. There was some cornmeal left. Hannah made mush. And before that? No one answered. Eleanor closed her eyes. 10 children, 2 days without food, a baby barely clinging to life, a sick boy, and she had $18 to her name. I'm going to town, she said. Town's 8 miles. Benjamin's voice was flat. And they won't sell to you. Why not? Because Pa owed money, lots of it. The boy's jaw tightened. Henderson at the general store, he said we couldn't have credit no more. Said Pa was a fool for bringing more mouths to feed when he couldn't pay his debts. How much debt? Benjamin didn't answer. Benjamin, how much? I don't know exactly, but there's a man Blackwood. He came around last month talking to Pa. Pa told us to hide in the back. Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. I heard them arguing. Blackwood said he was calling in the full note. Said Pa had till spring to pay, or he'd take the land. How much is the note? $300. The number hit Eleanor like a physical blow. $300. She had 18. Even if she sold everything she owned, even if she worked every day between now and spring, she'd never come close. There's more, Benjamin said quietly. More? Blackwood said if Pa couldn't pay, he'd petition the county to take us kids. Said orphans without family go to the children's home in Topeka. His voice cracked. I heard him laughing about it. Said they'd split us up, send us to different families, ones that needed cheap labor. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. That's not going to happen. How do you know? Because I won't let it. She grabbed her coat. Watch the little ones. Keep Tommy warm. Keep trying to feed hope. I'll be back. You said that yesterday. And I came back, didn't I? Eleanor paused at the door. Benjamin, I know you don't trust me. I know you're waiting for me to fail, but I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to hope. Just a little. Just enough to get through today. She held his gaze. Can you do that? The boy stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. I'll try. The walk to town nearly killed her. 8 miles through knee-deep snow, with wind that cut through her coat like knives. By the time Eleanor saw the buildings of Bitter Creek rising from the white landscape, she could barely feel her feet. But she kept going. The general store sat at the end of the main street. Eleanor pushed through the door, and the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. A heavy man stood behind the counter. Henderson, she assumed. He looked up at her entrance, and his eyes narrowed. Help you. I need supplies. Cornmeal, flour, salt beans, milk if you have it. Eleanor pulled out her money. I can pay. Henderson didn't move. He just looked at her, then at the coins in her hand. You're the McAllister bride. Yes. Jacob's dead. I know. So what are you doing here? Eleanor straightened her shoulders. I'm buying food for his children. Henderson laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. Lady Jacob McAllister owed me $40 when he died. Those kids ain't got nothing, and neither do you. He leaned forward on the counter. Best thing you can do is put those children on a train to Topeka and go back where you came from. I'm not leaving. Then you're a fool. Maybe. Eleanor set her money on the counter. But I'm a fool with $18. Are you going to sell to me or not? Henderson stared at the coins. Something shifted in his expression, greed warring with spite. Tell you what, he said slowly. You pay me $12 now, and I'll give you half what you asked for. Consider the rest payment toward Jacob's debt. That's robbery. That's business. Henderson shrugged. Take it or leave it. Eleanor wanted to argue. She wanted to rage against the unfairness of it, the cruelty of a man who would starve children over money. But she thought of Tommy's fever, of Hope's blue lips, of 10 hollow faces watching her leave that morning. She pushed $12 across the counter. I'll take it. Henderson swept the money into his pocket and began gathering supplies. Half portions of everything, just as he'd promised. Eleanor watched him, hatred burning in her chest, but she said nothing. She was almost to the door when a voice stopped her. Mrs. McAllister? Eleanor turned. A woman stood near the fabric bolts, tall, silver-haired, dressed in clothes too fine for this frontier town. It's Hartwell. Eleanor Hartwell. Forgive me. The woman moved closer, her eyes sharp and assessing. I'm Margaret Cole. My husband is the Reverend here. Mrs. Cole. I knew Jacob. He was a good man. Margaret's voice softened. Those children, they're alone out there. Not anymore. Something flickered in the older woman's face. Respect, maybe, or recognition. There are people in this town who will help you, Mrs. Hartwell, if you give them the chance. She reached into her basket and pulled out a jar of preserved peaches. For the children. And come to church on Sunday. You shouldn't face this alone. Before Eleanor could respond, Margaret turned and walked out, leaving the scent of lavender behind her. Eleanor stared at the jar in her hands. It was such a small thing, a single jar of peaches. But after Henderson's cruelty, it felt like a lifeline. She tucked it into her coat and headed back into the cold. The walk home was harder than the walk to town. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached. The supplies weighed heavy in her arms, and more than once she stumbled and nearly fell. But she kept going. She was 2 miles from the cabin when she heard hoofbeats. Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked around for somewhere to hide, but the prairie stretched flat and white in every direction. 2 riders appeared over the ridge. Hard-faced men with cold eyes and hands resting on their pistols. They pulled up beside her, blocking her path. "Mrs. Hartwell." The taller one tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Name's Garrett. My partner here is Slade." Eleanor's grip tightened on her supplies. "I don't know you." "No, ma'am. But you know our employer." Garrett smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Blackwood sends his regards. He wanted us to check on the McAllister property, make sure everything's in order." "Everything's fine." "Is it?" Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. See, Mr. Blackwood heard a rumor that Jacob's bride actually showed up. He was curious. What kind of woman travels 2,000 miles to marry a dead man? The kind who keeps her promises. Admirable. Garrett's smile widened. "But promises don't pay debts, Mrs. Hartwell, and Jacob McAllister left a lot of debts." "I'm aware." "Are you aware of what happens if those debts aren't paid by spring?" Garrett's voice dropped, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Mr. Blackwood will take the land, and those 10 little orphans you've been playing mother to, they'll be shipped off to Topeka faster than you can blink." Eleanor's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Garrett straightened in his saddle. "Mr. Blackwood wanted you to know he's a reasonable man. If you sign over the deed now, he'll forgive the debt. He might even give you a little something for your trouble. Enough to start over somewhere else. And the children? That's not your concern." "It is my concern." Eleanor stepped forward, her fear burning away into something hotter. "Those children are mine now. Jacob left them to me, and I am not signing anything over to anyone." Garrett studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or grudging respect. "You've got guts," he said. "I'll give you that, but guts won't save you, Mrs. Hartwell. Spring comes fast out here." He pulled on his reins, turning his horse. "We'll be back." Eleanor watched them ride away, her heart pounding, her legs shaking. She stood there in the snow for a long moment, letting the fear wash through her. Then she squared her shoulders and started walking. She had children to feed. The cabin was chaos when she returned. Hannah met her at the door, her face streaked with tears. "Samuel's gone. He ran off while Ben was chopping wood, and we can't find him anywhere." Eleanor dropped the supplies. "How long?" "An hour, maybe. Ben's out looking, but the snow." "Which direction?" "I don't know. Grace said she saw him heading toward the creek, but—" Eleanor was already running. The creek was a mile east of the cabin Benjamin had told her yesterday. In summer, it ran shallow and clear. In winter it froze over, but the ice could be thin in places. Treacherous. "Samuel?" Eleanor's voice tore through the cold air. "Samuel, where are you?" Nothing. Just the wind and the endless white. She ran faster, her lungs burning, her legs screaming. "Please, God, please, please, please. Samuel." And then she heard it, a small, frightened voice. "Help, help me." Eleanor followed the sound, crashing through snowdrifts, slipping on hidden ice. The creek appeared ahead of her, a ribbon of white cutting through the prairie. Samuel stood in the middle of it. The ice beneath his feet was cracking. "Don't move!" Eleanor's voice came out sharp, commanding. "Samuel, don't move a muscle. I can't." The boy was crying, his small body shaking. "I was looking for Biscuit. I thought I saw him and I followed, and now I can't." "Biscuit isn't real, sweetheart. He's your imaginary friend, but you are real, and I need you to stay very, very still." Eleanor dropped to her knees at the edge of the creek. The ice groaned beneath Samuel's weight. Any second now it could give way. I'm scared, Samuel whimpered. I know. I'm scared too. Eleanor pulled off her coat and stretched it toward him. I need you to grab this, Samuel. Can you do that? What if I fall? You won't fall. I've got you. Eleanor's arms shook with the effort of holding the coat steady. Trust me, Samuel. Please. The boy stared at her, his eyes wide with terror. Then he reached out and grabbed the coat. Eleanor pulled with everything she had. Samuel slid across the ice, and the moment he reached the bank, Eleanor grabbed him and rolled them both away from the edge. The ice behind them gave way with a crack like a gunshot. For a long moment, they just lay there in the snow, gasping, clutching each other. Then Samuel burst into tears. I'm sorry. I thought I saw Biscuit, and I wanted to find him, and I didn't mean to. Shh. Eleanor held him tight, her own tears freezing on her cheeks. It's okay. You're okay. That's all that matters. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. Eleanor pulled back and looked into his face. But I need you to promise me something. No more running off alone. Okay. If you want to look for Biscuit, you tell me, and we'll look together. But Biscuit isn't real. You said so. Eleanor hesitated. Then she smiled. Maybe he's real enough for you. And that's what matters. She struggled to her feet, lifting Samuel with her. Now let's get you home before your fingers freeze off. Benjamin found them halfway back to the cabin. He came running through the snow, his face wild with fear, and when he saw Samuel safe in Eleanor's arms, something broke in him. You stupid, stupid kid! Benjamin grabbed his brother and held him so tight Samuel squeaked. Don't you ever do that again. You hear me? Don't you ever... I'm sorry, Ben. I thought you were dead. Benjamin's voice cracked. I thought I lost you too, and I can't. I can't lose anyone else. He collapsed to his knees in the snow, his body shaking with sobs he'd been holding back for weeks. Maybe months. Maybe his whole life. Eleanor knelt beside him and put her arm around his shoulders. You didn't lose him, she said quietly. He's right here, safe. But what about next time? Benjamin looked up at her, his careful armor completely shattered. What about when you leave? What about when Blackwood takes everything? What happens to us then? I told you, I'm not leaving. Everyone says that. I know. Eleanor cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I know everyone says that. Your mama probably said it. Your papa probably said it. And then they died, and you were left alone, and you decided never to trust anyone again. Benjamin's lip trembled. How do you know? Because I did the same thing. When my mother died. When my husband died. Eleanor's voice was steady, but her heart was breaking. I told myself I would never let anyone in again. Never give anyone the chance to leave me. So what changed? Eleanor looked at Samuel still sniffling in Benjamin's arms. She thought of Hannah back at the cabin, exhausted and terrified, but still fighting. She thought of Tommy's fever breaking, and Hope's tiny mouth finally taking milk, and 10 children who had every reason to give up but hadn't. You did, she said. All of you. You changed everything. Benjamin stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay, what? Okay, I'll try. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I'll try to believe you. Eleanor pulled both boys close. That's all I ask. That night, the cabin was warmer than it had been in weeks. Eleanor cooked a real meal, beans and cornmeal, and a few precious slices of salt pork she'd managed to get from Henderson. The children ate like they'd never seen food before, scraping their bowls clean and looking up at her with something new in their eyes. Not trust. Not yet. But hope. The very beginning of hope. After supper, Eleanor gathered them around the fire. Tommy was propped up on cushions, his breathing easier, his color better. Hope slept in Hannah's arms, her belly full for the second time that day. I want to know your names, Eleanor said. all of you. And I want to know one thing you love." The children exchanged uncertain glances. "I'll go first," Eleanor said. "My name is Eleanor Hartwell, and I love the smell of bread baking." Silence. Then Samuel raised his hand. "I'm Samuel, and I love biscuit, even if he's not real." "I'm Tommy," the sick twin whispered, "and I love my brother." "I'm Jamie." The other twin pressed closer to Tommy. "And I love him too." One by one the children spoke. Grace, age 4, loved flowers. Michael, age 7, loved fishing. The 3-year-old Peter loved his wooden blocks. The toddler baby Daniel was too young to speak, but Hannah said he loved being held. "I'm Hannah," the 10-year-old said quietly. "And I love stories. Mama used to tell them. Before." "I'll tell you stories," Eleanor promised. "Every night if you want." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. For the first time since Eleanor had arrived, she actually smiled. "I'd like that." Only Benjamin remained silent. "Ben." Samuel tugged on his brother's sleeve. "It's your turn." Benjamin looked at Eleanor. His expression was guarded, but the hard edge had softened. "I'm Benjamin," he said finally. "And I love this family." His voice cracked. "What's left of it?" Eleanor reached over and took his hand. "What's left of it," she said, "is more than enough. And it's going to grow. I promise you that." Benjamin didn't pull away. He held on. Later, after the children had fallen asleep in a pile of tangled limbs and patched blankets, Eleanor sat by the fire with Jacob's ledger open on her lap. The numbers told a grim story. $40 to Henderson, $20 to the feed store, $300 to Blackwood due by April 1st, $360 total. Eleanor had $6 left. She closed her eyes and let the despair wash over her. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel it. Then she opened her eyes and picked up Jacob's pen. At the bottom of the last page below his final entry, she wrote, "Eleanor Hartwell, arrived December 5th, 1878. I choose to remain." She closed the ledger and tucked it back into the trunk. Tomorrow she would figure out the money. Tomorrow she would face Blackwood and Henderson and everyone else who wanted her to fail. Tomorrow she would fight. But tonight she would rest. She wrapped herself in a blanket and settled into the chair by the fire, watching the flames dance. Outside, the wind howled against the walls and the snow piled higher against the windows. But inside, 10 children breathed softly in their sleep. And Eleanor Hartwell kept watch until dawn. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of survival. Eleanor learned the rhythms of the house, which floorboard creaked loudest, which window let in the most draft, which child woke crying in the night. She learned that Michael talked to spiders and refused to kill them. She learned that the twins communicated in a private language no one else could understand. She learned that Grace carried a rag doll everywhere she went and called it Mama. She learned that Hannah couldn't read. It came out by accident a week after Eleanor's arrival. She'd found an old primer in Jacob's trunk and suggested Hannah help teach the younger ones their letters. Hannah's face went white. "I can't." "Why not?" "I just can't." Hannah backed away, her hands shaking. "I'm too busy. I've got too much to do." "Hannah." Eleanor caught her arm gently. "Talk to me." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I never learned," she whispered. "Mama was going to teach me, but then she got sick with Peter, and then she was sick with Daniel, and then she died, and Papa was always working, and—" She broke down sobbing. "I'm too old now. Everyone will laugh at me." Eleanor pulled her close. "No one's going to laugh at you," she said firmly. "And you are never too old to learn." She tilted Hannah's chin up. "Would you like me to teach you?" "You'd do that." "I'd be honored." So Eleanor taught Hannah to read. Every night after the little ones were asleep, they sat by the fire together, working through the primer one painful letter at a time. Hannah was a quick learner, She just needed someone to believe in her. By the end of the second week, she was reading simple sentences aloud. The cat sat on the mat. Hannah's voice trembled with pride. I did it. I actually did it. You did. Eleanor hugged her tight. I knew you could. Benjamin watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. But that night when Eleanor was banking the fire, he spoke. You're good with her. She's a good student. I mean, Benjamin struggled for words. You treat her like she matters, like what she wants is important. Because it is. Pa loved us. Benjamin's voice was quiet. But he didn't have time. He was always working, always worrying about money. He tried, but being loved and being seen aren't the same thing, Eleanor said gently. Your father loved you more than life itself, but love doesn't always know how to show up. Benjamin was silent for a long moment. Then, you see us? I try. Why? Eleanor considered the question. Why did she see them? Why did she stay up nights listening for coughs and cries? Why did she walk miles through snow for milk and medicine? Why did she fight so hard for children who weren't even hers? Because someone should have seen me, she finally said. When I was young. When I was scared and alone and desperate for someone to notice. She met Benjamin's eyes. Nobody did. So I decided I would be that person for someone else. Benjamin didn't respond. But the next morning he brought her coffee without being asked. And that Eleanor knew was progress. 2 weeks after her arrival, Eleanor went to church. She dressed the children in their cleanest clothes, patched and worn but presentable, and loaded them into the wagon for the long ride into town. Benjamin drove his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road. They're going to stare, Hannah whispered. Let them stare, Eleanor said. We have nothing to be ashamed of. But as they pulled up to the small white church, even Eleanor's courage wavered. The congregation had gathered outside, and every head turned as the McAllister wagon approached. Whispers followed them like shadows. That's her. The bride. Can you believe she actually stayed 10 children? She must be crazy. She won't last. They never do. Eleanor climbed down first, lifting baby Daniel from Hannah's arms. Then she turned and helped the little ones down one by one, keeping her spine straight and her chin high. Mrs. Hartwell. Margaret Cole stepped forward from the crowd, her silver hair gleaming in the winter sun. Mrs. Cole. Eleanor dipped her head. Thank you for the invitation. Nonsense. This is God's house. Everyone is welcome. Margaret's eyes swept over the children, and something soft flickered in her expression. Come, sit with me. She led them inside past the whispers and stares to a pew near the front. Eleanor settled the children beside her Daniel in her arms. Hope in Hannah's, and tried to focus on the Reverend's words. But her mind kept drifting to the debts, to Blackwood, to the impossible math that would determine their future. After the service, Margaret caught her arm. A word, Mrs. Hartwell, in private. Eleanor handed Daniel to Benjamin and followed the older woman outside. They walked a short distance from the church, stopping beneath a bare oak tree. Margaret's face was serious now, all warmth replaced by something sharper. I need to tell you something, she said. About Cornelius Blackwood. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Go on. He's been buying up land all over the county, foreclosing on families who can't pay, then selling to the railroad at profit. Margaret's lips thinned. He's had his eye on the McAllister land for years. Because of the debt. Because of the water. Margaret's eyes met hers. That property sits on the only reliable spring for 20 miles. Whoever controls it controls the whole valley. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. So this isn't just about money. It never was. Margaret took her hand. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're up against. Blackwood won't stop at letters and threats. He'll use the law, the church, whatever it takes. What can I do? Margaret squeezed her hand. Fight, she said simply. With everything you have, and know that you're not alone." She glanced back at the church, where a small group of women had gathered watching. There are people here who remember what Jacob did for this community. People who won't stand by while Blackwood destroys his family. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Margaret's grip tightened. "Blackwood is coming to church next Sunday. He always does first Sunday of the month. He'll see you. He'll know you're staying." "Good," Eleanor said, and she meant it. "Let him see." She walked back to her children, her heart pounding, her resolve hardening into steel. Blackwood wanted a fight. She would give him one. The week before Blackwood's visit crawled by like a wounded animal. Eleanor threw herself into work with a desperation that bordered on madness. She mended every piece of clothing in the house, then walked 3 miles to Mrs. Brennan's place to offer her services for trade. "You sew." Martha Brennan looked at the sample Eleanor had brought, a patched coat, stitches so fine they were nearly invisible. 14 years as a seamstress in Boston. City work. Work is work. Eleanor met her eyes. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance to earn." Martha studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "My husband's winter coat is falling apart. Fix it proper, and I'll give you flour and lard. Enough to last 2 weeks." Done. Eleanor worked through the night, her fingers cramping, her eyes burning. But when she delivered the coat the next morning, Martha's expression shifted from skepticism to respect. "This is fine work." "Thank you." "I'll spread the word. There's others around here who need a good seamstress." Martha pressed the promised supplies into Eleanor's arms. "You're not what I expected, Mrs. Hartwell." "What did you expect?" "A quitter." Martha almost smiled. "I'm glad I was wrong." But supplies weren't enough. Eleanor knew that. She could feed the children through winter maybe, if she worked every waking hour. But $300 by April, impossible. Unless something changed. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Eleanor dressed with extra care, wearing her best dress, the blue wool she'd brought from Boston, altered now to fit her thinner frame. She braided her hair back from her face and pinned it the way her mother had taught her before everything fell apart. When she stepped out from behind the curtain, Hannah stared. "You look different." "Good different or bad different?" Hannah considered. "Like you're going to war." "Maybe I am." The ride to church felt longer than usual. Eleanor's heart pounded against her ribs, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the wagon. Benjamin drove in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the road. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Face him, I mean. We could just stay home. And let him think we're scared. Aren't we?" Eleanor looked at him, this boy who had carried so much for so long. "Yes," she admitted. "But being scared and giving up aren't the same thing." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Pa used to say something like that." "Your pa was a wise man." "He was scared all the time at the end. I could see it." Benjamin's voice cracked. "But he never stopped fighting. Not until the very last breath." Eleanor reached over and squeezed his arm. "Neither will I." The church was already full when they arrived. Eleanor felt every eye turn toward them as she led the children down the aisle. Whispers followed like shadows, but she kept her chin high and her spine straight. And then she saw him. Cornelius Blackwood sat in the front pew, a tall man with silver hair slicked back from a high forehead, and cold blue eyes that swept the room like a hawk surveying prey. He wore a black coat that cost more than everything Eleanor owned combined, and his hands rested on a silver-tipped cane. When he saw her, he smiled. It was the smile of a man who had already won. Eleanor met his gaze and did not look away. She led the children to Margaret Cole's pew just behind Blackwood's and settled them with quiet efficiency. Hope fussed, and Eleanor rocked her gently, never breaking eye contact with the man who wanted to take everything. The service passed in a blur. Eleanor heard nothing of Reverend Cole's words. All she could see was Blackwood's silver head, the confident set of his shoulders, the way the congregation parted around him like water around stone. When the final hymn ended, Blackwood rose. He turned, and his eyes found Eleanor's. "Mrs. Hartwell." His voice was pleasant cultured. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Eleanor stood, hope still in her arms. The children pressed close around her. "Mr. Blackwood, I've heard so much about you." The mail-order bride who arrived too late. His smile widened. How tragic. Not too late. Eleanor's voice was steady. Right on time. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or annoyance. "I see you've been reading Jacob's ledger. Then you know about the note." "I know. $300 by April." "Spring comes fast out here, Mrs. Hartwell." Blackwood tilted his head. "I do hope you have a plan." Eleanor felt the weight of every eye in the church upon her. She felt Benjamin's tense presence at her shoulder, Hannah's hand gripping her skirt, the warm bundle of hope against her chest. "I have something better than a plan, Mr. Blackwood." "And what's that?" Eleanor lifted her chin. "I have faith." For a long moment, the church was silent. Then Blackwood laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the wooden beams. "Faith," he repeated. "How charming! I look forward to seeing what faith buys you when the snow melts." He tipped his hat to her, a mockery of courtesy. "Good day, Mrs. Hartwell." He strode out of the church, his cane clicking against the floor. Eleanor watched him go, her heart pounding, her hands steady. She didn't know how she would pay the debt. She didn't know how she would save the farm. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not let him win. The confrontation haunted her through the long ride home. Faith. She had said she had faith. But sitting in the cold wagon with 10 shivering children, watching the gray sky press down like a coffin lid, she wondered if faith was just another word for foolishness. "You shouldn't have done that." Benjamin's voice cut through her thoughts. "Done what?" Challenged him. In front of everyone. The boy's hands tightened on the reins. "Blackwood doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. You made an enemy today." "He was already my enemy. The moment I decided to stay, he became my enemy." Eleanor looked at him. "At least now he knows I won't run." Running might have been smarter. Maybe. Eleanor touched his shoulder. "But I'm not smart, Benjamin. I'm stubborn. There's a difference." The boy stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Pa was stubborn, too. "Then I'm in good company." They were a mile from the cabin when they heard the hoofbeats. Benjamin's hands tightened on the reins. Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs. Not Garrett and Slade again. Not now, not with all the children. But the rider who appeared over the ridge wasn't Garrett. It was a man she'd never seen before. Tall and weathered, with dark hair shot through with gray at the temples and eyes the color of winter sky. He rode a black horse with easy grace, and there was a rifle slung across his back. He pulled up beside the wagon, his face unreadable. "You the Hartwell woman?" Eleanor's hand moved instinctively toward the children. "Who's asking?" The man studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper. Eleanor recognized the handwriting instantly. Jacob's handwriting. "My brother wrote to me," the man said quietly. 2 months ago. Said he was dying. Said he needed me to come home." Eleanor's breath caught. "Josiah? I got here as fast as I could." His voice was rough, heavy with something that might have been grief. "Looks like I'm too late." Benjamin had gone rigid beside her. His face was white, his jaw clenched so tight Eleanor could see the muscle jumping. "You," the boy said. "You're the one who left." "Benjamin, Pa talked about you." Benjamin's voice shook with fury. "Said you ran off. Said you abandoned him when he needed you most. And now you show up, now when he's dead and buried, and we've been fighting to survive." "Benjamin." Eleanor put her hand on his arm. "Let him speak." "Why should I?" The boy's eyes blazed. He's 6 years too late. Where was he when Ma died? Where was he when Pa got sick? Where was he when we were starving? Josiah didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still on his horse, absorbing the boy's rage, like a man who believed he deserved every word. "You're right," he said quietly. "I wasn't here. And there's nothing I can say that makes that okay." "Then why are you here now?" "Because my brother asked me to come." Josiah's voice cracked just slightly. "Because I owed him a debt I could never repay. Because I've spent 6 years running from ghosts, and I'm tired of being a coward." Benjamin stared at him, his chest heaving. "That's not good enough." "I know." Josiah met the boy's eyes. "But it's all I've got." The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then Eleanor spoke. "We should get the children home. It's cold and hope needs feeding." She looked at Josiah. "You can follow us. We'll talk there." "Eleanor," Benjamin started. "He's their Uncle Benjamin. Whatever happened between him and your father, these children deserve to know their family." She held the boy's gaze. "All of it. The good and the bad." Benjamin's jaw worked. For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Then he clicked his tongue at the mule, and the wagon lurched forward. Josiah followed at a distance, giving them space. The cabin was chaos when they arrived. The children had stayed home with Hannah in charge, and the moment the wagon pulled up, they came spilling out the door. Samuel first, then the twins, then Grace and Michael and Peter, and little Daniel toddling behind. They froze when they saw the stranger. "Who's that?" Samuel's voice was small, uncertain. "Your uncle," Eleanor said quietly. "Your papa's brother." 10 pairs of eyes fixed on Josiah as he dismounted. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible like a man approaching spooked animals. "I know you don't know me," he said. "And I know you've got no reason to trust me. But I'm hoping you'll give me a chance." Nobody moved. Then Hannah stepped forward. Hope clutched against her chest. Her eyes were hard, assessing the look of a child who had learned too young that adults couldn't be trusted. "Pa said you ran away," she said. "Said you couldn't face what happened." He was right. What happened? Josiah's face tightened. "That's a long story. We've got time." Eleanor watched the exchange, her heart aching. These children had been through so much loss and fear and abandonment. They deserved honesty, even if it hurt. "Hannah," she said gently, "let's get inside first. Get everyone warm and fed. Then we can talk." Hannah held Josiah's gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded and turned back toward the cabin. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. That night, after the children had eaten and the little ones were asleep, Josiah told his story. He sat by the fire, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, his eyes fixed on the flames. Eleanor sat across from him. Benjamin and Hannah flanked her like guards, their faces wary. "Your grandmother, my mother, died when I was 15, Josiah began. "Fever took her fast. One day she was fine, the next she was gone." He paused, the memories clearly painful. "Our father blamed me. Said I'd brought the sickness home from town. Said if I'd been more careful, she'd still be alive." "Was it true?" Benjamin asked. "I don't know. Maybe. I'd been helping at the trading post, meeting folks from all over. Could have picked something up." Josiah's voice was hollow. "But it didn't matter if it was true. Pa believed it, and he never let me forget." "What did he do?" Hannah's voice was soft. "Nothing you could see from the outside. No fists, no marks. Just words." Josiah's jaw tightened. "Every day in 100 little ways he reminded me that I was the reason his wife was dead, that I wasn't worth the air I breathed, that Jacob was the good son and I was the curse." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She knew that kind of abuse, the invisible kind, the kind that left scars no one else could see. "I stayed as long as I could," Josiah continued. "For Jacob. He was all I had. But when I was 20, our father—" He stopped. swallowed. He told me to leave, said if I stayed another day he'd kill me, and I believed him. So you left, Benjamin said flatly. I left. Josiah finally looked up, meeting the boy's eyes. I told myself I was protecting Jacob, that if I was gone, Pa would stop being so angry, that things would get better. Did they? I don't know. Your father never said. He wrote to me sometimes over the years, told me about your mother, about all of you. But he never talked about Pa, never mentioned what happened after I left. Grandfather died, Hannah said quietly, before I was born. Pa said he went peaceful. Josiah laughed a bitter, broken sound. Peaceful. After everything he did. He shook his head. I suppose that's the way of it. The ones who cause the most pain never seem to pay for it. Silence settled over the cabin. Then Benjamin spoke. Why didn't you come back after he died? Because I was ashamed. Josiah's voice cracked. I'd been gone so long. Built a life for myself out west, working as a scout for the army. I told myself Jacob didn't need me, that he was better off without me. Were you wrong? Every day of my life. Josiah leaned forward, his eyes intense. I should have been here, Benjamin. When your mother died. When your father got sick. When you were fighting to keep this family together. I should have been here and I wasn't. And I will carry that guilt until the day I die. Benjamin stared at him for a long moment. Pa kept writing to you, the boy said slowly. Even after you stopped answering. I found the letters once hidden in his desk. Dozens of them. He never gave up on you. Josiah's face crumpled. I know. He loved you, even after everything. I know that too. Josiah wiped his eyes roughly. And I wasted it. Every chance he gave me I threw away. Then don't waste this one. Everyone turned to stare at Benjamin. The boy's face was fierce, his eyes bright with tears he refused to shed. You're here now, he said. That's what matters. Pa always said. His voice cracked. Pa always said it wasn't the falling that defined a man. It was the getting back up. Josiah stared at his nephew. Something shifted in his expression. Wonder maybe, or gratitude. He said that all the time. Every time things got hard. Benjamin squared his shoulders. So, are you getting back up, or are you going to run again? The question hung in the air. Eleanor watched Josiah struggle with it, watched the war play out across his weathered face. Fear fighting hope, shame fighting redemption, the past fighting the future. I'm done running, Josiah said finally. I swear to God, I'm done. Benjamin nodded slowly. Then welcome home. The days that followed were a careful dance. Josiah slept in the barn, insisting he didn't want to crowd the cabin. He rose before dawn and worked until after dark, repairing fences, chopping wood, doing the heavy labor that had been beyond Eleanor's strength. He moved through the property like a ghost, efficient, silent, asking for nothing. But Eleanor noticed things. She noticed how he left extra portions of food on his plate, claiming he wasn't hungry. She noticed how he watched the children from a distance, hungry and hesitant, like a stray dog afraid to come too close to the fire. She noticed the way his hands shook when Samuel showed him the wooden horse, and the way his eyes went wet when the twins fell asleep against his shoulders one evening by the fire. He was learning them, memorizing them, making up for 6 years of absence, one small moment at a time. But not all the children were ready to accept him. Hannah kept her distance, watching Josiah with wary eyes. She wasn't hostile, just careful, protective. He could still leave, she told Eleanor one evening when they were alone. People leave. They always leave. Not always. Ma left. Pa left. They didn't choose to leave, sweetheart. They were taken. What's the difference? Hannah's voice was bitter. Gone is gone. Eleanor pulled her close. The difference, she said gently, is that Josiah is still here. He's still choosing to stay. Every day, every hour he's choosing, and that matters. Does it? More than you know. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. I want to believe you, she whispered. But I'm scared. I know. Eleanor kissed her forehead. Being scared is okay. It means you have something to lose. A week after Josiah's arrival, Garrett came back. Eleanor was hanging laundry when she saw the riders approaching, 3 of them this time, not 2. Garrett and Slade, plus a third man she didn't recognize. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Josiah! Her voice carried across the yard. He emerged from the barn, instantly rifle in hand. His eyes swept the approaching riders, calculating distance and angle with the practiced ease of a man who had seen combat. Get inside, he said quietly. Take the children to the back room. No. Eleanor moved to stand beside him. This is my fight too. Eleanor? I said no. Something flickered in Josiah's expression. Respect maybe, or recognition. Then stay behind me. The riders pulled up at the edge of the yard. Garrett tipped his hat with that same mocking courtesy. Mrs. Hartwell, I see you've got yourself some protection. I see you've brought friends. Eleanor kept her voice steady. Feeling nervous, Mr. Garrett. The man's smile faltered. Mr. Blackwood's getting impatient. Deadline's 6 weeks away, and he ain't heard word one about his money. He'll get his answer when I'm ready to give it. That ain't going to work this time. Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. See, Mr. Blackwood's done playing nice. He sent us with an offer. I'm listening. Sign over the deed today, right now, and he'll forgive the debt. He'll even give you $100 to start over somewhere else. Garrett spread his hands. That's more than fair. Eleanor felt Josiah tense beside her. And the children. That's not your concern. It is my concern. Eleanor stepped forward. Those children are mine. Jacob left them to me, and I am not signing anything. Garrett's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Hartwell. Then it's mine to make. Is it? Garrett's eyes slid to Josiah. What about you, stranger? You willing to die for land that ain't yours? Josiah raised his rifle. I've died for a lot less. The 2 men stared at each other. Eleanor could feel the tension crackling between them, electric and dangerous. You're Samuel Dawson. Garrett's voice was flat. Jacob's brother. The one who ran. The one who came back. Little late for that, ain't it? Maybe. Josiah's voice was ice. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Garrett studied him for a long moment. Then he laughed a harsh, ugly sound. 2 city women and a broken-down drifter against Cornelius Blackwood. He shook his head. This ought to be entertaining. He pulled on his reins, turning his horse. 6 weeks, Mrs. Hartwell. Enjoy them while you can. They rode away, their hoofbeats fading into the distance. Eleanor stood frozen, her heart pounding her legs, threatening to give way. They're going to come back, she said quietly. With more men. With the sheriff, maybe. I know. We can't fight them, not with guns. I know that too. Josiah lowered his rifle. But we can fight them other ways. How? Josiah was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather pouch. This is everything I've saved from my years in the army. $43. He pressed it into Eleanor's hands. It ain't much, but it's a start. Eleanor stared at the pouch. Her throat tightened. Josiah, I spent 6 years running from this family. Let me spend the rest of my life fighting for it. She looked up at him, this broken man who had ridden into her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. Together, she said. Together. That night, Eleanor sat by the fire with Jacob's ledger open on her lap. She added Josiah's $43 to her own meager savings. Then she counted what she'd earned from sewing $18 so far with promises of more work. $67 total. 300 needed. 233 to go. 6 weeks to find it. Impossible odds. Impossible math. Impossible hope. But Eleanor had learned something in the weeks since she'd stepped off that train. Impossible wasn't the same as giving up. Impossible just meant you had to try harder. She closed the ledger and looked around the cabin. 10 children slept in tangled piles, their breathing soft and even. Josiah had finally come inside, settling into a chair by the door, his rifle across his lap. Hannah had fallen asleep with her head on Eleanor's shoulder, the primer still clutched in her small hands. This was her family now, not by blood, not by law, but by choice, the most powerful bond of all. And she would fight for them, with everything she had, until her very last breath. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Eleanor's life. She worked until her fingers bled, taking every sewing job she could find. She walked miles through snow and ice to deliver mended coats, patched dresses, altered trousers. She bartered, she traded, she scraped together every penny she could find. Josiah worked alongside her, never complaining, never stopping. He repaired the barn, rebuilt the fences, chopped enough wood to last 2 winters. He rode into town and offered his services as a laborer, hauling freight-breaking horses, anything that paid. The children helped too. Benjamin set snare lines and brought home rabbits. Hannah took over the cooking, stretching every meal as far as it could go. Even the twins pitched in, gathering kindling and hauling water. But the money came slow, too slow. $93, Eleanor said, counting their savings for the 100th time. We've got $93. That's better than nothing. Josiah sat across from her, his face drawn with exhaustion. It's not 300. No, it ain't. Eleanor stared at the coins spread across the table. 3 weeks until the deadline. $207 to go. Maybe we could talk to Blackwood, she said. Ask for more time. Men like Blackwood don't give more time. Josiah's voice was hard. They take. That's all they know how to do. Then what do we do? He didn't answer. He didn't have one. The knock came just before dawn. Eleanor was awake instantly, her heart pounding. Josiah grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Who's there? It's Martha Brennan. Open up. Josiah exchanged a glance with Eleanor, then unbarred the door. Martha stood on the porch, her face grim. Behind her, barely visible in the gray light, was a wagon piled high with supplies. What's going on? Eleanor asked. Get dressed, both of you. Martha's voice was urgent. We need to talk, and we ain't got much time. They gathered around the table, Eleanor, Josiah, and Martha, while the children slept on, oblivious. Word's gotten around about Blackwood's deadline, Martha said. About what he's planning to do. Let me guess. Eleanor's voice was bitter. People are scared. They don't want to get involved. Some are scared, sure. Martha leaned forward. But some are angry. Real angry. What do you mean? I mean Blackwood's been bleeding this valley dry for 10 years. Foreclosing on families, buying up land, selling it to the railroad for profit. Everyone knows what he is. They've just been too afraid to stand up. And now... Martha's eyes met hers. Now they've got something to stand up for. I don't understand. You, Eleanor. You and these children. Martha's voice softened. Folks have been watching you. Watching how hard you work, how you never give up, how you treat those kids like they're your own flesh and blood. They see it, and they're talking. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Talking doesn't pay debts. No, but this might. Martha reached into her coat and pulled out a leather pouch. She set it on the table with a heavy thunk. That's from the Kellers. Otis sold his best plow horse to raise it. Eleanor's throat closed. Martha. There's more coming. The Coles are taking up a collection at church. The Hendersons, yes, even Henderson are putting something in. Farmers from 3 counties over have heard about you. Martha's voice cracked. You're not alone, Eleanor. You never were. Eleanor couldn't speak. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Josiah spoke for her. Why? Why would they do this? Because that's what community means. Martha reached across the table and gripped Eleanor's arm. We look after our own, and you're ours now, whether you like it or not. The money came in waves. Every day, it seemed someone new arrived at the cabin. Farmers with weathered faces and calloused hands pressing coins into Eleanor's palm. Women from town bringing food and fabric and whispered words of encouragement. My husband said to give you this. A young wife Eleanor didn't recognize handed her $5. He said Jacob McAllister saved his life once, pulled him from a flooded creek when they were boys. He never forgot. Jacob delivered my baby when the doctor couldn't get through the snow. An older woman with kind eyes gave her $3. I always meant to repay him. This feels right. I didn't know the McAllisters personal. A rancher from the far side of the county handed Josiah a $10 bill. But I know Blackwood, and any enemy of his is a friend of mine. By the end of the second week, Eleanor had $247. 53 to go. But time was running out. We're not going to make it, Benjamin said one evening. Are we? Eleanor looked at him. The boy had grown taller in the weeks since her arrival. His shoulders were broader, his voice deeper. But his eyes still held the fear of a child who had lost too much. We might not, she admitted, but we're going to try. What happens if we fail? Then we fight harder. And if that's not enough? Eleanor reached out and took his hand. Then at least we'll know we did everything we could. That counts for something, Benjamin. Maybe it counts for everything. The boy stared at her, then slowly he nodded. Pa would have liked you, he said quietly. I hope so. No. Benjamin's voice was fierce. I know so. He would have loved you, the way you fight, the way you never give up, the way you make us feel like we matter. His eyes glistened. He would have loved you, and I think maybe we do too. Eleanor pulled him close, holding him tight. I love you too, she whispered. All of you. More than I ever thought possible. The night before the deadline, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire staring into the flames, counting and recounting the money they'd raised. $271, still 29 short. They had tried everything, sold everything they could spare, worked every job they could find. The community had given until it hurt, but it wasn't enough. You should rest, Josiah settled into the chair beside her. I can't. I know. He reached out and took her hand. I've been thinking. About what happens tomorrow. His voice was rough. If we can't pay, Blackwood will petition the county. He'll try to take the land and he'll try to take the children. I know. I won't let that happen. Josiah's grip tightened. If it comes to it, I'll take them. All of them. We'll disappear into the territories, start fresh somewhere Blackwood can't find us. That's not a life, Josiah. Running, hiding, always looking over your shoulder. It's better than losing them. Eleanor looked at him, really looked. At the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the scars he carried inside and out. This man who had spent 6 years running, who had come home to make amends, who had fought alongside her every step of the way. There has to be another way, she said. If there is, I don't see it. Neither do I. She leaned her head against his shoulder. But I'm not ready to give up. Not yet. They sat together in silence, watching the fire burn low. And somewhere in the darkness, Eleanor began to pray. Morning came gray and cold. Eleanor dressed carefully, deliberately. She put on her blue wool dress, the same one she'd worn to face Blackwood in church. She braided her hair and pinned it back. She looked at herself in the small mirror and saw a woman she barely recognized. Stronger, harder, ready for battle. You don't have to come alone. Josiah stood in the doorway, his coat on his rifle by his side. I'm not going alone. Eleanor looked past him to where the children had gathered. All 10 of them dressed in their best clothes, their faces solemn. "We're all going," Benjamin said. "Together. Children. This is our fight too." Hannah stepped forward. Hope clutched against her chest. "Whatever happens today, we face it as a family." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "All right," she said. "Together." The ride to town felt like a dream. Eleanor sat in the wagon, the leather pouch of money pressed against her heart. Around her, the children were silent, their small faces tight with tension. Josiah drove his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road. When they crested the final ridge and saw Bitter Creek spread out before them, Eleanor's breath caught. The main street was packed. Wagons and horses lined both sides of the road. People stood in clusters, talking in low voices, their breath fogging in the cold air. And as the McAllister wagon rolled into town, every head turned. "What's going on?" Benjamin whispered. Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. Martha Brennan pushed through the crowd and caught the mule's bridle. "You're late," she said, but there was a smile in her eyes. "We've been waiting." "Martha, what is this?" "This is your community, Eleanor Hartwell." Martha gestured at the crowd. "Every single person who gave money to your cause. Every single person who believes in what you're fighting for." Her voice dropped. "They wanted to be here, to see it through to the end." Eleanor climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaking. The crowd parted for her faces she recognized and faces she didn't. Martha Brennan, Margaret and Reverend Cole, the young wife who had given her $5, the rancher from 3 counties over. And at the end of the street, standing in front of the bank, Cornelius Blackwood. He wasn't alone. Garrett and Slade flanked him along with 2 men in suits who looked like lawyers, and beside them, a man wearing a sheriff's badge. "Mrs. Hartwell." Blackwood's smile was cold. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come. I wouldn't miss it." Eleanor walked toward him, the crowd flowing behind her like a tide. She could feel their presence at her back, solid, unwavering, real. "You have something for me?" Blackwood asked. "I do." Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out the leather pouch. $271. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "That's not 300. "No, it isn't." Eleanor's voice was steady. "But it's what we have. Every penny earned through honest work given by people who believe in something you never will." "And what's that community?" Eleanor lifted her chin. "Decency. The idea that people matter more than profit." Blackwood laughed. "Very touching. But sentiment doesn't pay debts, Mrs. Hartwell. The note says $300 by April 1st. You're $29 short." "I know." "Then you know what happens next." He nodded to the sheriff. "The county will take possession of the land. The children will be remanded to state custody. And you," his smile widened, "you can go back to wherever you came from." "No." The word came from behind Eleanor. She turned. Benjamin had stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "What did you say, boy?" Blackwood's voice was sharp. "I said no." Benjamin's voice shook, but he didn't back down. "That land belonged to my father. He worked it. He bled for it. He died for it. And you're not taking it." "The law says otherwise." "The law says a debt can be negotiated." This time it was Reverend Cole who spoke, stepping out of the crowd. "I looked it up. If the debtor offers payment in good faith and the creditor refuses reasonable terms, the court can intervene." Blackwood's smile faltered. "You're not a lawyer, Reverend." "No, but I am." A man Eleanor didn't recognize pushed forward. He was young with sharp eyes and a determined set to his jaw. "William Peters. I practice law in Denver. I happened to be visiting my sister when I heard about your little foreclosure scheme." "This is none of your business." "I'm making it my business." Peters stepped up beside Eleanor. "These people have raised $271 in good faith. That's 90% of the debt. Any reasonable creditor would accept a payment plan for the remainder. I'm not a reasonable creditor. No. Peter smiled thinly. You're a vulture, and I've dealt with your kind before. The crowd murmured. Eleanor saw Garrett's hand move toward his pistol, then stop when he realized how many people were watching. You think you can threaten me? Blackwood's voice was ice. In my own town, this isn't your town. Margaret Cole stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming. It never was. You just convinced everyone it was because they were too afraid to stand up. I've lived here 50 years. An old man Eleanor didn't know pushed to the front. I remember when this was just a trading post. I remember the families who built it, who died for it. The McAllisters were one of those families, and I'll be damned if I let a carpetbagger like you tear apart what they built. Hear, hear. The crowd rumbled agreement. Blackwood's face reddened. You're all fools, every single one of you. I have the law on my side. You have money on your side. Eleanor's voice cut through the noise. That's not the same thing. She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the anger burning in his cold blue eyes. I came to Montana expecting a husband, she said. I found a grave, but I also found something else, something you could never understand. And what's that? Family. Eleanor's voice was fierce. Not just the children, all of them. She gestured at the crowd. Every person here who gave what they could. Every person who stood up when it would have been easier to look away. That's family, Mr. Blackwood. That's community. And you can't buy it. You can't threaten it. You can't foreclose on it. Blackwood stared at her. For the first time, Eleanor saw something other than contempt in his eyes. Fear. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Eleanor held up the leather pouch. Take this money, $29 a month until the debt is paid, or refuse and I'll have Mr. Peters drag you through every court from here to Washington. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then a voice spoke from the crowd. Wait! Everyone turned. Martha Brennan was pushing through the mass of people, her weathered face alight with something Eleanor couldn't read. There's more, Martha said breathlessly. It just came. Writer from the telegraph office. She pressed a piece of paper into Eleanor's hands. Eleanor read it, then read it again. Her knees buckled, and Josiah caught her. What is it? He asked. Eleanor, what does it say? Eleanor looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. It's from Fort Laramie, she whispered. From the men Josiah served with. They heard about what was happening and they... Her voice broke. They took up a collection. How much? Eleanor handed him the paper. Josiah stared at it. His face went white. $63, he said hoarsely. They sent $63. The crowd erupted. Eleanor couldn't hear anything over the roar. Cheers, shouts, people crying and laughing and embracing each other. She felt arms around her children clutching her legs. Josiah's hand gripping hers so tight it hurt. They had done it. Against all odds, against every obstacle, against a man who had money and power and the law on his side, they had won. Eleanor turned to Blackwood. $334, she said. That's $34 more than I owe you. Consider the extra a down payment on your next victim, whoever that might be. She held out the money. Blackwood didn't move. His face was ashen, his jaw clenched so tight Eleanor could see the muscle jumping. Take it, she said quietly. Take it and walk away. It's over. For a long moment he just stared at her. Then slowly he reached out and took the pouch. This isn't finished, he said. Not by a long shot. Yes, it is. Josiah stepped forward, his voice hard. And if you ever come near this family again, I'll make sure it's the last thing you do. Blackwood's eyes flickered to the crowd, to the dozens of faces watching, waiting ready to stand against him. He turned and walked away. Garrett and Slade followed. The lawyers followed. Even the sheriff, after a moment's hesitation, turned and left. And Eleanor stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by her family, all of them blood and chosen alike, and let herself breathe. It was over. They had won. That night the celebration lasted until dawn. Someone brought a fiddle, someone else brought whiskey. The children danced and laughed, and stuffed themselves with food that seemed to appear from nowhere, pies and cakes, and roasted meat, and fresh bread. Eleanor sat on the cabin porch, watching it all unfold. "You did it." Josiah settled beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. "We did it." "No." He shook his head. "This was you, Eleanor. Your stubbornness, your faith, your refusal to give up. None of this happens without you. I couldn't have done it alone." "That's the point." Josiah turned to face her. "You didn't have to do it alone. Because you let people in. You let us help you. You let us love you." His voice dropped. "That takes more courage than anything else." Eleanor looked at him, this man who had ridden into her life when she needed him most, who had fought beside her, who had stayed. "I never thought I'd have this," she said softly. "Any of it. A home. A family. Someone who—" She stopped suddenly, shy. "Someone who loves you." Her heart stuttered. "Josiah." "Because I do." His hand found hers in the darkness. "I know it soon. I know we barely know each other. But I've spent 6 years running from everything good in my life, and I'm done running, Eleanor. I'm done being afraid." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." His voice was rough, uncertain, but his eyes were steady. "I'm saying I want to build something with you. Something real. If you'll have me." Eleanor couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight, her heart too full. But she could answer. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative. Then deeper, fiercer, carrying all the hope and fear and longing of the past weeks. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Is that a yes?" Josiah asked. "That's a yes." He smiled, the first real full smile she had ever seen from him. "Then I guess we're doing this." "I guess we are." They sat together on the porch, hand in hand, watching their family celebrate. The fiddle played on. The children laughed, and for the first time in longer than Eleanor could remember, she felt at peace. Not because the battle was over, but because she knew whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The weeks that followed were a different kind of hard. Not the desperate scraping survival of before. This was the hard work of building, repairing what had been broken, planting seeds for the future, knitting together a family from scraps and hope. Josiah officially moved into the cabin. He slept on a pallet by the fire, at first maintaining propriety until they could be properly married. But he was there, every morning, every night. Present. Permanent. The children began to heal. Benjamin stopped watching the horizon for threats. He started laughing again, joking with his siblings, letting himself be young. Hannah learned to read whole paragraphs, then pages, then chapters. She devoured every book Eleanor could find. Tommy's cough disappeared entirely. The twins stopped fighting so much. Samuel no longer talked about Biscuit running away. Now he talked about the real puppy Josiah had promised him come spring. And Hope, little Hope, who had been so close to death that first terrible night, grew fat and happy. Her laughter ringing through the cabin like music. "You saved them," Martha Brennan said one afternoon watching the children play. "You know that, don't you?" "We saved each other," Eleanor smiled. "That's how it works." "Is it?" "It's how it should work anyway." Martha was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. "Jacob would be proud." "I hope so." "I know so." Martha's voice was fierce. "That man loved his children more than life. And he chose you to take care of them. He saw something in you, something special, and he was right." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." Don't thank me. Just keep fighting. Martha gripped her hand. That's all any of us can do. The wedding came in April just as the snow began to melt. Simple, small, perfect. They gathered in the little white church, Eleanor and Josiah, the 10 children, and every person who had helped them survive the winter. Margaret Cole played the organ. Reverend Cole spoke the words. And when Josiah slipped his mother's ring onto Eleanor's finger, the congregation erupted in cheers. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Josiah kissed her, and Eleanor felt something shift inside her. A door closing on the past, a window opening to the future. They were a family now. Official, real, and nothing, not Blackwood, not hardship, not the cruel indifference of the world, could tear them apart. That night, after the celebration, Eleanor stood on the porch and looked out at the land that was now truly hers. The fields stretched toward the horizon, brown and bare, but full of promise. The barn stood straight and solid, rebuilt by Josiah's hands. The cabin was warm, filled with the sounds of sleeping children. What are you thinking about? Josiah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Everything. Nothing. She leaned back against him. I was thinking about the letter, the one Jacob wrote. What about it? He asked me to come, to take care of his children, to give them a mother. Eleanor's voice was soft. But he gave me so much more than that. What did he give you? A home. She turned to face him. A family. A purpose. A reason to keep fighting when I wanted to give up. She touched his face. And you. He gave me you. Josiah's eyes glistened. I spent 6 years hating myself for leaving, he said, for running away when Jacob needed me. But maybe I was supposed to leave, so I could come back, so I could find you. Do you believe that? I'm starting to. Eleanor kissed him gently. Then that's enough, she said. For now, that's more than enough. They stood together in the darkness, husband and wife, watching the stars emerge one by one. Behind them, 10 children slept peacefully. Before them, the future waited, uncertain, challenging, but full of hope. And Eleanor Hartwell McAllister knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, she was ready. Spring arrived like a promise finally kept. The snow melted into rushing streams. The prairie turned green, tentative at first, then bold and defiant. And on the McAllister farm, life stirred in ways Eleanor had never dared to imagine. She stood on the porch in the early morning, watching Josiah and Benjamin work the field together. The boy had grown taller over the winter, his shoulders broader, his movements more confident. He no longer watched his uncle with suspicion. Now he watched him with something closer to reverence. He's teaching him to plow. Hannah appeared at Eleanor's elbow. Hope balanced on her hip. The baby was fat and rosy now, her cheeks round, her eyes bright. I see that. Pa used to do it the same way. Same hands, same stance. Hannah's voice was soft. Sometimes I forget which one I'm watching. Eleanor put her arm around the girl's shoulders. Hannah no longer flinched at the touch. She leaned in just slightly, and Eleanor felt her heart swell. Your pa would be proud, Eleanor said. Of all of you. Of you too. Hannah looked up at her. He chose right bringing you here. I didn't give him much choice. I just showed up. That's not what I mean. Hannah shifted Hope to her other hip. He could have written to anyone. There must have been other women answering those advertisements. But he picked you. He saw something. What do you think he saw? Hannah was quiet for a moment, considering. Someone who wouldn't quit, she said finally. Someone stubborn enough to stay. Eleanor laughed. The sound surprised her. She hadn't laughed much in her life. Not real laughter, not the kind that bubbled up from somewhere deep and true. Stubborn, she repeated. That's one word for it. It's the right word, Hannah smiled. Mama was stubborn too. That's how I know it's a good thing. The days lengthened, and the farm transformed. Josiah finished the fields and turned his attention to the house. He patched the roof, replaced the broken shutters, reinforced the walls. He built new furniture, a proper table chairs for everyone, beds for the children, so they no longer had to sleep in piles on the floor. Benjamin worked alongside him, learning everything he could. The boy had stopped watching for threats on the horizon. He had started laughing again, joking with his siblings, letting himself be young. But it was the evenings that mattered most. After supper, when the children gathered by the fire, Josiah would tell stories. Tales of the frontier of mountains so tall they scraped the sky, of rivers so wide you couldn't see the other shore. He spoke of battles and friendships, of loss and redemption, of men who had fallen, and men who had risen. The children listened with rapt attention. Even Benjamin, who pretended to be too old for stories, never missed a single one. And Eleanor listened too. She learned about the bear attack that had nearly killed Josiah at 15. She learned about his time in the army, the friends he had lost, the guilt that had followed him like a shadow. She learned that beneath the hard exterior was a man who had been broken and was slowly, painfully learning to heal. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Josiah found her on the porch. "Mind if I sit?" "It's your porch now." "It's ours." He settled onto the bench beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Everything here is ours." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this." "Neither did I." Josiah pressed a kiss to her hair. "But here we are. Here we are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The night air was warm now, carrying the scent of new growth and possibility. "I've been thinking," Josiah said finally. "About what?" "About the future." He hesitated. "About children." Eleanor's heart stuttered. "We have 10 children." "I know, and I love every single one of them." He turned to face her. "But I was wondering, hoping maybe if you might want more, ours, together." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I thought after Theodore—" She stopped, struggling for words. "I never thought I'd have another chance. I'm not young anymore, Josiah. You're not old either." He cupped her face in his hands. "And even if nothing comes of it, I want you to know, I want whatever future we can have. However it looks. Whatever it brings." "You mean that—" "More than I've ever meant anything." Eleanor kissed him soft and slow. "Then yes," she whispered. "Whatever the future brings, yes." Summer blazed into autumn, and with it came harvest. The crops Josiah had planted in spring grew tall and golden. The children worked alongside the adults, gathering and bundling, laughing and singing. It was hard work, but there was joy in it, the joy of building something together. "We're going to make it." Benjamin stood beside Eleanor, surveying the fields. "Aren't we—" "We already made it," Eleanor said. "This is just the proof." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For staying." His voice cracked. "For not giving up on us. For being—" He stopped, his jaw working. "For being what?" "For being our mother." Eleanor's heart broke and healed in the same breath. "Benjamin, I know you're not our real mother. I know she's gone and she's never coming back." Tears streamed down his face. "But you're here. You chose us. You fought for us. And that—" He choked on a sob. "That matters more than blood ever could." Eleanor pulled him close. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm not your real mother. But you're my real son. Every single one of you real. Mine. Forever." Benjamin clung to her like he had when he was younger, before the world had hardened him. And Eleanor held him, letting him cry, letting him finally be the child he'd never had the chance to be. The harvest festival came at the end of October. The whole valley gathered in town wagons, rolling in from miles around. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. The celebration of another year survived on the unforgiving frontier. Eleanor sat with the other women watching the children play. Hope was walking now, tottering on unsteady legs, falling, and getting back up with determination that made everyone laugh. "She's got your stubbornness," Martha Brennan said. "She's got her mother's stubbornness." Eleanor smiled. Constance must have been quite a woman. She was. Martha's voice softened. Kind heart, iron spine. Loved those children more than life itself. She looked at Eleanor. "You remind me of her sometimes." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It's meant as one." The fiddle started up, and Josiah appeared at Eleanor's elbow. "Dance with me." "I don't dance." "Neither do I." He held out his hand. "But I'd like to try." Eleanor let him pull her to her feet. They moved together, awkward at first, then finding a rhythm. Not graceful, not elegant, but real, true. "I love you," Josiah said quietly. "I love you too. I want you to know." He spun her gently. "Whatever happens next, whatever challenges come, I'm not going anywhere. Not ever again. I know." "Do you?" Eleanor looked into his eyes, those winter sky eyes that had been so cold when she first saw them, now warm with love. "I know," she said. "Because I'm not going anywhere either." November brought cold and quiet. The harvest was in. The animals were fed. The house was stocked for winter. For the first time since Eleanor had arrived, there was nothing urgent to do. No crisis to solve. No battle to fight. Just living. "This is strange," she told Hannah one evening. "Having nothing to worry about." "I know." Hannah looked up from her book. She was reading real novels now, working through everything Eleanor could find. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen." "Me too." "Do you think it will?" Eleanor considered the question. "Probably," she admitted. "Life is hard. It doesn't stop being hard just because things are good for a while." She reached out and squeezed Hannah's hand. "But we'll face it together, whatever comes. Promise?" "Promise." The something bad came 3 days later. Eleanor was making breakfast when Josiah burst through the door, his face white. "It's Samuel," he gasped. "He fell through the ice at the creek." Eleanor's blood turned cold. "Is he?" "He's alive. Benjamin pulled him out. But he's freezing, Eleanor. He's not moving." She was running before he finished speaking. Samuel lay on the bank of the creek, his small body shaking violently. Benjamin knelt beside him, his own clothes soaked, his face twisted with terror. "I got him out," the older boy said. "But he won't stop shaking. I don't know what to do." Eleanor dropped to her knees. Samuel's lips were blue. His eyes were unfocused. His skin was ice cold. "Josiah, get him to the house. Now." They carried him together, running as fast as they could. The other children had gathered on the porch, their faces pale with fear. "Everyone inside," Eleanor ordered. "Build up the fire. Get every blanket we have." What followed was the longest hour of Eleanor's life. She stripped Samuel's wet clothes and wrapped him in warm blankets. She heated water and pressed warm cloths to his chest, his neck, his armpits. She held him close, sharing her body heat, willing life back into his frozen body. "Please," she whispered. "Please, sweetheart, stay with me." Samuel's shaking slowed. His color began to return, and finally, his eyes focused on her face. "Eleanor." His voice was barely audible. "Am I in trouble?" She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "No, baby, you're not in trouble. I was looking for Biscuit." His lip trembled. "I thought I saw him on the ice, and I just wanted—" "Shh." Eleanor pressed her lips to his forehead. "It's okay. You're okay. That's all that matters." "Is Biscuit real?" Eleanor looked at him. This small boy who had lost so much, who still clung to an imaginary friend because the real world had been too painful to bear. "I think," she said slowly, "that some things are real in ways we can't see. Real in our hearts, even if they're not real anywhere else." She touched his cheek. Biscuit is real to you, and that makes him real enough. Samuel smiled weakly. I love you, Eleanor. I love you too. She pulled him closer. So much, Samuel. More than you'll ever know. That night, after Samuel was asleep and safe, Eleanor sat by the fire with Josiah. That was close, he said quietly. Too close. But he's okay. This time. Eleanor's hands were still shaking. What about next time? What about the next accident, the next sickness, the next… Hey. Josiah took her hands. Stop. Breathe. I can't. Yes, you can. His voice was firm but gentle. Eleanor, listen to me. We can't protect them from everything. We can't wrap them in cotton and keep them safe forever. All we can do is love them. Be there for them. Help them learn to face whatever life throws at them. What if it's not enough? It's always enough. He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Love is always enough. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when we're scared and helpless and sure we're going to fail. His voice cracked. I spent 6 years running because I was afraid of failing the people I loved. And you know what I learned? What? The only real failure is not being there. Everything else, every mistake, every accident, every near miss we can survive, as long as we're together. He kissed her forehead. And we are together, now and always. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself breathe. He was right. She knew he was right, but knowing didn't make the fear go away. It just made it bearable. Winter came again, fierce and unforgiving, but this time Eleanor was ready. The house was solid, the larder was full, the children were healthy and strong, and when the snow piled high against the windows and the wind howled outside, Eleanor gathered her family around the fire and told stories of her own. She told them about Boston, about the boarding house where she'd spent 3 years stitching other women's dreams. She told them about Theodore, about the man who had loved her and died trying to save others. She told them about her mother, who had taught her to sew and to survive, and to never ever give up. You never talk about your father, Hannah said one evening. Eleanor's hands stilled on her mending. No, she said quietly. I don't. Why not? The other children had gone quiet, sensing something important. Because he wasn't a good man. Eleanor kept her voice steady. He hurt my mother. He hurt me. And when I was old enough, I ran away. Like Uncle Josiah. Yes. Eleanor looked at Hannah. Like Uncle Josiah. Except I never went back. Do you regret it? Not for a single moment. Eleanor set down her mending. Listen to me, all of you. Family isn't blood. It isn't a name on a piece of paper. Family is the people who love you, who choose you, who stay. She looked around at each of them. You are my family. Every single one of you. And nothing will ever change that. Benjamin spoke first. You're our family too, he said. You and Uncle Josiah. Forever. The other children nodded, their faces solemn. Forever, they echoed. Eleanor felt tears spill down her cheeks. Forever, she whispered. The years that followed were not easy. There were hard winters and lean summers. There were sicknesses and accidents and moments of despair. There were fights and tears and doors slammed in anger. But there was also joy. So much joy. Benjamin grew into a man tall and strong, with his father's quiet wisdom and his mother's iron will. He married a schoolteacher from town, a gentle woman with a fierce heart, and they built a house on the far edge of the property. Hannah became a teacher herself, the first woman in the valley to earn a proper degree. She traveled to Denver for her schooling, returning every summer, always bringing books and stories and the wide world's news. The twins joined the cavalry, serving with distinction. They wrote letters home full of adventure and longing, and when they finally returned, they brought wives of their own, and tales that kept the family spellbound for hours. Samuel never lost his imagination. He became a writer, spinning stories of the frontier that captured hearts across the nation. He dedicated his first book to Eleanor, who taught me that some things are real in ways we can't see. And the others, Grace Michael, Peter, Daniel Hope, each found their own paths. Farmers and teachers, doctors and preachers, mothers and fathers, each one carrying a piece of the family with them wherever they went. Eleanor watched them grow. She celebrated their triumphs and comforted their sorrows. She held their children and their children's children, marveling at how far her family had spread. And through it all, Josiah was beside her. They had no children of their own, though they tried for years. But it didn't matter. They had 10 souls who called them mother and father, 10 lives they had saved and shaped and loved into being. It was more than enough. It was everything. "I'm tired," Eleanor said one evening many years later. She sat on the porch wrapped in a quilt Hannah had made, watching the sun set over the fields. Josiah sat beside her, his hand clasped in hers, his hair now white as snow. "I know," he said. "Me too. We've had a good life. The best." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you remember the day we met?" she asked. "When you rode up to the wagon like some kind of ghost from the past?" "I remember." Josiah chuckled. "You looked at me like you wanted to shoot me." "I probably did. And now," Eleanor smiled, "now I want to thank you. For coming back, for staying, for being the best partner I could have ever asked for." Partner. Josiah lifted her hand to his lips. "I like that word. It fits us. It does." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. "I'm not scared," Eleanor said softly, "of what comes next. I thought I would be, but I'm not." "Why not?" "Because I've already had everything I ever wanted." She looked at him, her eyes bright with tears. "A home, a family, a love that lasted." She squeezed his hand. What more could anyone ask for? Josiah didn't answer. He just held her close the way he had for 30 years. And when Eleanor closed her eyes that night, she did so with a smile on her face. She had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a dead man. She had found a grave, 10 starving children, and a broken stranger who became the love of her life. She had built a family from nothing, fought for them, bled for them, loved them with everything she had. And in the end, that love had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything. 3 days later, Eleanor Hartwell McAllister passed away in her sleep. She was 83 years old. She was surrounded by her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. She was holding Josiah's hand. And according to everyone who was there, she died smiling. The funeral was the largest the valley had ever seen. People came from hundreds of miles away. Former students of Hannah's, readers of Samuel's books, children and grandchildren scattered across the nation, all returning to say goodbye. Benjamin spoke first. "She wasn't our mother by blood," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But she was our mother in every way that mattered. She chose us. She fought for us. She loved us when no one else would." He wiped his eyes. "And she taught us that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build." Hannah spoke next. "She taught me to read," she said simply. "When I was 10 years old and ashamed because I didn't know my letters, she sat with me every night and taught me. She never made me feel stupid. She never made me feel like I was too old to learn." Hannah's voice cracked. "She made me believe I could be anything, and because of her I was." One by one the children spoke, each with their own memory, each with their own tribute. And finally, Josiah stood. He was frail now, bent with age, but his voice was strong. "I spent half my life running from love," he said. "I was afraid of it, afraid of what it would cost me, afraid of what I'd lose." He looked at the crowd. "And then I met Eleanor, and she taught me something I'd never learned before." He paused, gathering himself. She taught me that love isn't about being safe. It's about being brave. It's about showing up even when you're scared. It's about staying even when leaving would be easier. His voice broke. She was the bravest person I ever knew, and I am the luckiest man in the world because she chose me. He turned to the grave. "I'll see you soon, my love," he whispered. "Wait for me." Josiah lived for another 6 months. He spent his final days surrounded by family telling stories, holding great-grandchildren, watching the legacy Eleanor had built continue to grow. And when he finally passed, it was peaceful, quiet, like falling asleep after a long day's work. They buried him beside Eleanor on the hill overlooking the creek. The headstone read simply, "Together forever." Years later, when grandchildren asked about the woman who had started it all, the answer was always the same. "Your great-grandmother Eleanor was a mail-order bride," they would say. "She traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met. When she arrived, he was already dead, and 10 children were starving in a broken-down cabin." "What did she do?" the children would ask wide-eyed. "She stayed. But why?" And the answer passed down through generations never changed. Because she believed that family isn't born, it's built. Built from sacrifice and stubbornness. Built from showing up when running would be easier. Built from choosing each other day after day no matter what. The children would nod, not quite understanding, but someday they would. Someday they would have their own families, their own struggles, their own moments of despair when giving up seemed like the only option. And in those moments, they would remember Eleanor. They would remember a woman who walked 4 miles through a blizzard to buy milk for a dying baby. They would remember a woman who faced down a corrupt banker with nothing but faith and stubbornness. They would remember a woman who loved 10 children who weren't her own as fiercely as any mother had ever loved. And they would find the strength to keep going. Because that was Eleanor's true legacy. Not the land, though, that passed to Benjamin and remained in the family for generations. Not the money, though the farm prospered beyond anyone's expectations. Not even the children, though they spread across the nation and built families of their own. Her true legacy was simpler than that. Her true legacy was hope. The hope that family can be found in the most unexpected places. The hope that love can heal even the deepest wounds. The hope that one person with nothing but determination and a stubborn heart can change the world. Eleanor Hartwell, McAllister, had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a dead man. She had found a grave, 10 starving children, and a life she never expected. And she had built something beautiful, something lasting, something true. Family isn't born, family is built. And Eleanor built hers with her own 2 hands, one impossible day at a time. That was her story. That was her triumph. And that more than anything else was why she was remembered. Not as a mail-order bride who arrived too late, but as the mother who stayed.